CBIS 327, Chapter 4, Adding Images. We will be updating both websites in this chapter and adding some image components, being it images on a web page or being it images being used for background of the website itself. You will find your images listed under your assets panel, and you will use the insert panel and the option under a comment to add images to your site. As the images are added to your site, Dreamweaver should make a copy of the image and place it under the assets folder on your sites. And so, of course, as you are adding images, I want to make sure that you can check under your HTML code that this has been the case, that basically the image that's been inserted points to your folder in your website. For example, in this case. Where you can clearly see that the images have been stored in the assets folder for the particular site. As you highlight the code for the image, notice that the properties inspector will change and it will show you the properties that can be modified through it for this particular object added to your site. Notice that we're going to be creating specific CSS rules that will basically control how images will display. One of these rules is going to be created for all the images on the site overall. And then as we are looking at responsive design, then there are going to be some modifications that will be done to the CSS styles for the mobile devices. So notice that when we go to the CSS designer, then we are going to have the option of making changes and creating rules that affect the whole website, or particular instances in which there is a specific CSS file that will apply in the different styles within it. Within the CSS designer, you'll also find a way of transferring a rule that you have created in one source to another. And that process is pretty straightforward. You just take the rule and you click and you drag the rule on top of the source where you would want that rule to be at. So as you click and drag, make sure that before you release your mouse that the correct CSS file is highlighted so that when you let go of the left mouse button, then that rule is copied to the intended CSS file. When you create the rule for your images for your site, notice that there's going to be different properties that you're going to be modifying through the CSS designer. Of course, you could go into the code section of your document and type these manually, and then Dreamweaver would assist you in the syntax of your rule as you're typing it in. What we do with the CSS designer is we have an interface in place that can help make some tasks easier. And so notice that you're going to be working on the layout and you're going to be making modifications to the image float rule that you're creating. There are times in which you're going to pick just very specific properties that you're going to be modifying. And there are times in which you are going to choose to change all properties in one section and apply the same setting to them. You are going to add borders, you are going to add vertical space using the margins option. You are also going to be defining the position of the image in relation to text. And so notice that you have an option of having the image aligned to the left or to the right, or to have no alignment set up for it. Working with borders Should be a pretty straightforward process as you click on the border option. And you're going to be working with the width, with the style, with the color. And you will preview these changes on the different platforms, mobile, tablet, and desktop. Now, in terms of alternate text, then this is a text that is going to be added as a description of the image for screen readers to have access to. You will see this option of alternate text under the Properties Inspector. But you will also see that there's some editing that you can do on the image in terms of width and height and what programs you're going to be using to edit your image itself. Notice that I could use other programs to edit images, and here from Dreamweaver you can click on the Photoshop button and be taken into Photoshop. The image would be open there and you could use the options in Photoshop to edit it. You also have the Edit Images setting button, which will give you access to tools within Dreamweaver that you could use. Notice then that when I change the settings in Dreamweaver, then there are limited options as to what I could do in terms of the preset, the format, and the quality of the image. So Dreamweaver is not meant to replace a better graphic design program that you might have, but to just give you access to some basic, very basic tools. Now when you look at the width and the height properties in Dreamweaver, we are changing the size of the image itself in terms of physically what we see on the screen, but that does not affect the file size. So thinking about download times and your image content on your web pages, then in Photoshop and in many other programs you can set up to optimize your images for the particular medium that you're going to be using them for. And in that sense you can see and make a comparison between the importance of the image, the quality of the image, and the download time that it would place upon the web page and all the content there, or if you're going to have the images load up all at once, or if it's going to be gradually loading in, if you're going to be using thumbnails first and then have the bigger version of the image display. These are all choices that you're making as you're choosing images and how you're going to be using them on your website. You might have noticed that we're not only using images for the content of the web pages, but also as background. And so with that in mind, as you're going through your code, make sure that you are in the header code, and then you can have access to the page properties from the modify menu option. And so let me show you really quickly where that is. So when you click under the modify menu, again make sure that you have clicked in the code on the header section and it will be visible. You can see the page properties, and you are going to use the page properties as a way of setting up this image as background for the pages in your website, using the appearance CSS category and then browsing into your computer and finding the JPEG that is going to be used. And then immediately this will apply to basically all the web pages that you have created. They will have this background. There are many properties that can be modified through page properties. From the appearance in CSS to HTML, the way in which the links are displayed for the whole website, how the headings are defined. Then you have the title for the site and options for tracing image. Remember that as you go through these dialog boxes, there might be an option for help at the bottom. And so in that sense, you could get localized help depending on where you are in Dreamweaver. Then you can get more information about the particular section of the program that you're using. As you can see, once you have changed that page property, then you're going to have access to uh, the rules through your CSS designer, and you will be able to use the interface to make any changes. As you're working with the CSS designer, it is easy to get distracted by all the properties that are listed here. So there are instances in the chapter in which you're going to check this box, show set, so that it only shows the properties that you have actually worked on, and you can do a quick overview of the CSS properties and if everything's working correctly. The last two uses that you're going to have for images and that you're going to be practicing here will be using an image to link to another image, and then basically adding a little icon on the tab for your particular web page when it displays a favicon. And so notice that if I go to my image and I have it selected, then I will be able to see the code for that particular image and properties for that image in the property inspector. And through the property inspector, then notice that I can define that this image is going to be a link, so that when we click on it, it's going to take me to another location, or in this instance to a bigger version of the image itself, and users might not have an interest on looking at a bigger version of an image. So some of these things can be set up so that they're optional, and this is why you see that if the person is interested in seeing the bigger version of the map, then they can click on the thumbnail or the smaller version of the map to get there. We haven't worked with creating hotspots on an image, but notice that there are other tools that are also part of the properties inspector when it comes to images themselves. So being able to take an image and draw within it out different sections of the image to make a particular section of an image something that I can click on and have a different navigation to. It's entirely possible using the hotspots tool here. And if you wanted to create a special rule for this particular image, then you can specify an ID, and then you can create a CSS style for that particular ID that would apply only to that one image. So when we create CSS rules, they don't have to apply to everything. We can have, as you have seen, different instances in which we have classes where we specify a rule that's going to be used in particular instances. We can then use the ID and just create a rule for one particular situation, or we can create CSS rules that apply to an HTML tag, and then everywhere that that tag is being used, then that particular formatting will apply. But as you have seen, it is possible to create your CSS styles within the document, even though it's discouraged, because reality is it makes the task of maintaining complicated. And so you will see that this is why within this website we have more than one CSS style sheet, and that they're created as separate, there's separate files where there's different content that it's applied, different rules that are applied to the content within the web page itself, and then there is only one place that you need to go in terms of changing any rule or changing anything that affects the appearance, instead of having to scroll up and down the page trying to find a specific rule or use the find tool for that. So as you're working this week on chapter 4, you will be making changes to About Us, the index page, and the SPA page. You will be creating on the SPA page CSS rules to help you change the appearance of your text so that it's readable. And so you are going to be creating unordered and ordered lists for some of the text that is displayed here so that it's easier to read. And again, if there are any particular questions about what you're going to be doing on this chapter, or there are um, issues with any of the features working, just Drop me a line and let me know how things are going on your end. I will be using the information that you submitted to me